everybody feeling? Awake? Like you've had food and maybe coffee? Yeah? Good. All right, so today, like he said, we're going to talk about iterative prototype testing. I'm going to start with a little intro to start us off. So my name is Marisa, and I work as the head of research at a digital agency called Clearhead. And so I'm responsible for product management and research. So that means that we do experience optimization, and we do that for companies like Adidas, Tesco, Sonos, lots of other places. And my whole job, why I am there, is to make the process of buying or using products online better, easier, and faster for all of you. So today we're going to talk about a framework, and we're going to learn how to create paper prototypes or low-fidelity prototypes, how you can use some strategies for prototype testing to ease up your design and development effort, and then also learn how to implement feedback that you've gotten so that the designs you're creating are the best designs possible to go out and ship. So we all have processes at work. Any process, anything that we do is a process. You know, if it's 1 step or 20, it's a process. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So let's talk about this old process. How many of us spend hours and hours designing and developing? Raise your hands. Yeah? Lots of time. How many of us are on constant deadlines to ship a product or service to meet deadlines that we may or may not have set ourselves? Yeah? 2 hands over here. Yeah. Multiple hands, double hands, exactly. And then a lot of times, we have to meet that deadline and watch in fear and horror as it tanks. We get right to the beginning. We get right to the apex of everything, and it just blows up in our faces. We're so close. We're so close. But what if it could be different? What if we didn't have to do that? What if there was another way that we could create products and services and that we could do things that made it so that it was better for us? Imagine a new world. Imagine the possibilities. We're still spending hours and hours designing and developing. That's not going to change. We're still going to ship that product to meet that service or deadline because sometimes we don't have control over that. But now we get to watch as we conquer and do it well. And that is what this new process is going to do for us, because there is a new and improved process, and it's something that you can integrate within your team, and it doesn't have to be hard, it doesn't have to be multi-step, and we're going to talk about a framework for that so that you can do that within your own teams. So step 1, start with the prototype. How many of you are using prototypes right now, either like paper prototypes or Sketch or InDesign? Everybody, right? How many of you are working on brand new products, like net new stuff? A few, and I bet most of us are doing like what I'm doing, where we're taking something that exists and trying to make it better, yeah? Yeah, okay. So we can start with a prototype that is anywhere from a paper prototype, which we would use for something brand new, all the way to Sketch or even InVision. But your goal is to get a very low fidelity prototype as the first thing. This is the first thing that you need to do this. And this is where we're going to sketch out our idea. So it can be a new idea. It can be the redesign of something that already exists, which is what I do a lot. But what we want to do is create a prototype with cross-functional teams. So right now, how many of you create designs with just your designers? Couple? How many of you bring in developers when you do design? That's awesome. How many of you bring in product managers or project managers? A few. Perfect. That's what we want. We want everybody who's going to touch this to be able to have a piece to say in how this prototype is being created. And the reason for that is that when we get these ideas, we're able to put them together and kind of riff off of them to get this low fidelity prototype that we use that we're going to test later. And it also creates an environment of collaboration. And when we're able to collaborate, we get better ideas. So it shouldn't just be siloed teams working on each separate thing. We should be bringing in other people. And it can be really simple, like 20-minute working sessions where we're all working together to create this sketch and prototype. So that's the first step, create your prototype. We want it to be low fidelity if it's a new design. And if you're updating something, then we want it to be maybe Sketch or InVision. A lot of times in my work, we use InVision. So we've got a design sketched out, right? And we put it in InVision and we can click through it. And it's still very low. It doesn't, it takes maybe an hour to put it in if it's a long flow. But it's very simple. And all we're doing is trying to make sure that the flow works. So you need to just keep it as quick and low fidelity as possible without bringing in other rounds of development, because we're actually going to take this and do something with it. Why do we want to do that? We want to focus our interaction on the interactions and the design layout without getting too hung up on details, right? Once we start bringing in lots of different colors, once we start bringing in more of the branding, we start to get distracted by that stuff. So we want to just be testing the interactions and see how people respond to them. And since we're doing iterative testing, that means we can change and pivot quickly. So we want to make sure that we are keeping this simple so that we can change it later. So step 2, pick your research. I bring up research a lot in the talks that I do, and I sometimes see like this physical reaction where people's eyes get wide and they're like, why are you saying that word? I don't like it. It's a very scary word. So how many of you do research? Okay, so more than I'd think. That's really good. How many of you talk to users at any point in your work? And there are a few more. So we're all doing research, right? So what we're doing is we're just going to make this a little bit more focused. We're going to actually put it into a process. And research doesn't have to be multi-step, many, many days or weeks, at least not for this. That's not the type of research we want to do. Instead, we want to think about some things around our customer. So how would we, for instance, find our demographic? We want to start with that. Where would we find our demographic if it's a new product? How would we test them and talk to them and interview them? How would we identify the testing options available to us? And how would we decide how long the test should be? How would we decide how long we want to talk to them? These are some of the first things we want to think about when we're starting to put together research inside this process. And then we need to think about what questions should we be asking. Things like, who are the people using our thing? Why are the people using our thing? And how and when do they use our thing? So these are some initial things we want to use to frame how we're going to talk to people. And this is all to set up that research that we want to do to be able to get an understanding of what works and what doesn't, so that then we can make the changes that are necessary to create something even better. So finding people can be difficult. A lot of times we think, oh, well, I need to talk to somebody about this product. I don't know what to do. So either A, I will talk to no one and just use my big brain to fix it, or I'll try to find maybe 1 or 2 people. They may or may not be the right person for it, but I don't know, I should probably just get a second opinion. So it kind of feels like hide and seek, where we know these people are out there, somebody's using it, but how do I get them? So if you don't already have an email distribution list or something that you can pull from, there's actually some really quick and easy ways that you can talk to people that are still in that demographic, but don't require you direct emailing someone or things that are much more difficult. You can find people on Reddit, where everybody apparently lives. There's so many things and so many places that you can do research on Reddit. I myself have done research on Reddit, and it's actually really fun. You can do these quick little surveys and get feedback instantly. You can do it on LinkedIn, depending on what your product or service is, and that allows you to get a different group of people that may or may not be using that service. And finally, you can use friends and family or even, you know, friends of friends, if they're people that are going to be using the thing. If you've asked yourself this question, you know, who's using the thing, when are they using it, and why? Once you've answered those questions, all you have to do is find the place to get the people to talk to you, and these are a few ways to do that. So, after you've found people, what are you going to do? Just like, how would you set this up? You don't want to have to bring them in and talk to them face to face. You can if you want. But there's a lot of things that you can do, and we'll talk about two main ways to actually have these conversations. And the first one is called a cognitive walkthrough. And so this is where you can do something actually inside your own team. And what that looks like is, remember when we talked about having collaboration and cross-functional team members? So we can get people on our teams and in our building that would be the people that would use this product and have them go through facilitated tasks that we've set up. And it doesn't have to be very long. It can be really quick, but what it helps us do is frame the actual way that people are going to use this product. And it frames it in a way that we may not currently understand, because even though we are a user, we are not the only user. So you can use this when you're on a really tight timeline and you have to get something out the door like tomorrow. You can also do guerrilla research. So this is basically talking with people that have never seen your product or site. These are the people that you would find on Reddit or LinkedIn. They may be interested in the product or service that you have to offer, but they haven't ever seen it. So you can find them and ask them if they would be willing to take this type of survey or to talk with you and walk through these steps. You can use this when you've got a few more days. It only takes like maybe 3 days to get all this information. And the interviews do not have to be long. So these are the two ways that we would want to think about getting this type of feedback really quickly and quite easily. So you may be thinking, all right, I got to talk to these people. That's fine. But what am I actually going to get? What benefit is this going to provide? So the first thing is problem discovery. A lot of times we go into a project and as we're creating it, we think to ourselves, well, this is a problem and that's a problem, and I don't like this, but I'll change it later. And that may or may not be true, but you don't know. And you also don't know what other problems exist that you can't see because you don't use the product or service in the way that somebody else would. So it's a great way to get initial problem discovery and see what other instances may be coming up that you haven't thought of. You can get directional insights. And so what that means is we may see a few people keep mentioning the same thing over and over again. Like they'd like to see another page or another functionality. And we wouldn't know that unless somebody told us. So it helps give us direction on where we should go in the future. It gives us information on actionable things that we can change right now. And then it helps us get all of this before we spent a bunch of money. Because we're already going to spend the time designing it, and we're going to spend the time developing it. So why not make sure that once it gets to that development step, that we are more confident about what we've done? So step 3, we've got to create the questions. When we're talking to people, we have to remember a few things about not only how people work, but also the best way to get someone to open up and tell you things. So we have to ask ourselves, what's the main goal for the user? If I am on Amazon, my main goal you may think my main goal is to hit buy and you know, get my new, I'm trying to think of something funny. But I may be on there to try to get, I don't know, a new step ladder because I can't reach anything. So get a new step ladder for my house so that I can actually reach the cupboards. That may seem like what it is, like I may be on there to buy something. But what I really want is a solution to my problem, which is I can't put glasses on the top shelf because I can't reach them. So what is the main goal that the person is trying to complete on the site? You may think that it's getting them to click the button, but you're really trying to solve a problem for them. What are the top 3 things you want to learn from the interview? If you go in and you say, well, I don't know, I'm just going to start asking questions and we'll see what people say, that's not going to actually help you direct or guide what you're trying to learn. So you're just going to get a bunch of insights but have no framework to use them. So what do you want to learn? Maybe you want to understand if it's easy for people to go through the site. Maybe you want to understand if people know how to get from point A to point B quickly and without a lot of trouble. It all depends on what product or service you're talking about, but you need to understand what you want to learn. And then you have to decide, how long should this interview be? If we're talking about something that's brand new and this like low fidelity prototype, things can be between 15 minutes all the way to 45 minutes. It really depends. And the faster you do the research, the faster you're able to make these changes. But the biggest thing that you need to remember when talking to people is when user testing, we want to falsify our idea, not validate it. We do not want to go in saying, this is a problem, and I need someone to tell me that this is a problem, because we end up skewing answers and not getting actual solutions to the problems that exist. So always go in trying to falsify an idea you have, and go in with an open mind, not trying to validate something. So a few tips on interviewing. How are you going to do this? If you've kind of hit people up on Reddit or LinkedIn, you've sent out a message and said, hey, I want to talk to you about this new product that I have. Would you be willing to meet with me? You can do it a few ways. You can meet in person, do it locally at a coffee shop somewhere neutral. You can also do a quick survey and have them go through and tell you what they liked and didn't like. You need to make it simple. And if you're talking with them in person, you need to listen and ask follow-up questions. Your job is to help facilitate a conversation. You're not there to ask them to hit specific areas of the interaction and go to certain places. All you want to see is how they go through that task. How do they complete the thing that they are on the site to do? And you're there to listen and ask questions. And when they seem to have trouble, when you hear things like, oh, well, now where do I, when they start talking to themselves, where do I go to do that? You can kind of draw them out and help facilitate that conversation and say, well, what are you thinking? Like, where would you go? If you don't see where you should go, where would you go? Your whole job is to be there and facilitate this conversation and just get a little bit more information out of them so that you understand what they're actually thinking, even if they're not able to like physically click through every single screen. So these are the most important questions you should ask. And there are really, truly only 3. Everything should center around this. So you want to know about the last time they did something. So say that we've got a product that we're trying to sell. I want to know the last time they bought something similar. If I'm trying to say, if I've got a new site that sells shoes, I want to know about the last time that they went and bought a pair of shoes online. So tell me about that. What did they do? How did they do it? I want them to show me how they would do that thing. When they're looking at the information that I've given them, how would they complete a certain action, or how would they end up buying a pair of shoes if they were given this information? And then lastly, what do you expect to happen if you clicked this? What do you expect to happen if you selected this option? So we're trying to get an understanding of what their expectations are before they go either to the next screen or to the next step of the process. And the reason for this is that whenever we're on a site, you can think of it like a bunch of rooms, right? And every time we make a decision, we're opening a new door. And if we have an expectation that behind that door is like a bouncy house with a bunch of unicorns and something amazing, we're going to be really sad if we open the door and it's just like an empty room with nothing in it. So we want to make sure that we understand what people's expectations are and we're able to work within those and set those properly. We always want to make sure we're taking notes and have verbal permission to record if we're going to do that. And I suggest if you can, especially if you're working specifically in the US, it's a little bit easier, but to get verbal permission to record and be able to use those notes later. So what should you be walking away with? When you're done, you should have notes that you can use later, but you want to be able to have a couple things that you can actually turn to. you should be able to know that people had trouble doing blank. What did they have trouble doing? And it doesn't have to be one thing. It can be several things. But you should have a list of things that people had trouble doing. And then a list of things that people were able to do easily. And once you know that, even through a bulleted list, you're able to go back and say, okay, if people had trouble understanding where to go to get to this next option, I have to reconfigure how we're doing that. And the biggest thing to remember about people is that past behavior predicts future behavior. So I've listed a lot of questions about when was the last time you did this? How would you think about doing that? I've never asked like someone to perform a specific task. I've never asked them to now go do this thing. I've never asked them, would you pay X amount for this thing? Because people don't know. People have no idea what they're going to do 3 seconds from now. We think we do. We want to believe that we know that, but we don't. The only thing that we know is that our past behavior is going to predict our future behavior. So if you understand how someone thinks about things and how they've done things in the past, you can then meet them where they are and reconfigure what your designs and your products and services to really meet them where they are and help guide them along. So step 4, we have to analyze these interviews. If we have our list, right, what do we do with that? We think about what similarities did we find among people? What were the biggest problems? And then what did we do well? We want to make sure that things that we're doing well are being repeated. We're basically looking for patterns. If you only talk to maybe, say, 5 or 6 people, you're not going to get this huge data set where you're going to be able to say, okay, I know exactly what's wrong. But you will see that people probably struggled in the same areas throughout their interactions. They may also have similar problems. You want to see what those patterns are so that you can identify them and then work to correct them. And next, you want to create actionable results. Think about what are you going to change, what can you leave the same, and then what will you change for your next test? Will you change different format? Will you change questions? What do you want to do? Because this really does need to be something that is iterative. And to be iterative, we have to do it more than once. So if you have time, you can repeat the entire process. You can create either a new paper prototype, or if you're shorter on time, really want to get things out the door, create a clickable Envision prototype. Still does not take as much time, but it allows you to get more information and go through another round of talking to people to understand what issues they're having now that you've taken their feedback and incorporated it. And after you've done that a couple times, you can wrap it up and get ready to send it out the door. So when we're talking about wrapping it up and like tying it with a bow, the question always comes up is, okay, if this is an iterative and it's a process and I'm always changing and trying to be better, when is my design good enough? Am I ever done? Could I just do this forever? Well, yes, you could, but that's not going to be the way the world works, right? So when is my design good enough? If you are talking with people and the interactions that you've got run pretty smoothly, it's probably good enough. If your feedback now is mainly positive and you don't see people stumbling through a lot of the different tasks they're trying to do, it's probably good enough. If they aren't visibly frustrated, I have had people swear, not at me, well maybe kind of at me, but they swear as they're going through something because they can't figure it out and they get so mad. And you can just see them, kind of like shaking with rage because they can't figure out how to do the thing. If they're not doing that, it's probably good enough. And then if you're not seeing these consistent errors as patterns come up over and over again, then it's probably good enough. You're never going to be perfect. There's always going to be improvements that we can make, and that's just true of products, of services, and of life. Like, we can always be better, but getting it out the door is also important. So just make sure it's good enough, and then once you do that, you need to prepare for the future. So this process has been about how we get all the way up through design before it's going to go and get developed and go out the door, right? But a lot of times we don't think about preparing past that point. We get very wrapped up in, oh, we gotta get this out, we gotta ship it. But there is a future that we also have to prepare for, because once it goes out the door, you're now in a new phase of this product or service that you've created, right? So how can you prepare yourself so that later you don't have to go back and do all of this over again, and you can still get information and feedback from people? And to do that, you want to set up passive research and data collection. We've heard a lot in the past couple days about getting data, using Google Analytics, doing research, and talking to people. And another way that we can do that is by setting up this passive information after we've already launched something. And it helps us get more information and understand what's happening, right? Get direct feedback from people. And then we're able to identify what changes we should make and give us evidence to advocate for change, which is probably the biggest thing. So I know that in my own work, a lot of times I'll say, this thing is a problem, we need to fix this. Multiple people are having trouble with this. And someone will say, well, we don't really have time or money to do that. I don't know that it's really a problem. When I have data and analytics, I can say, look, people are dropping off at this point, so you have numbers that are telling you that it's a problem. And then two, I have an open forum where people are yelling at us about the problem. It's a problem, we need to fix it. So it gives us evidence so that we can advocate for change and help be that voice. So how do we do that? Passive research. What we want to ask is mainly three things. And we tend to do this, at least in my company, we do this as like a poll on the site. And people are already there, right? So this just kind of comes up and allows them to get more, allows them to give us information. But we ask, what did they come here to do today? So what is their goal? Which is very similar to some of the things we asked them before, right? We also ask them, have they been able to complete what they came here to do? That's a yes or no. But then depending on that answer, we want to know what we could change to make their experience better. And that's an open form. And a lot of times it shows us that there's a step in the process that's not working for someone, and it lets us know where that is. And so we're able to identify patterns a lot more easily. So how do you do this? I know that Dan earlier mentioned Hotjar. We also use Hotjar in a lot of cases. There's also Mouseflow and Qualtrics, all that allow you to do to set up these types of polls on your site. And they're really easy to set up and don't take a lot of time. And you can just send them out to a certain percentage of your traffic so that you're getting this kind of sample data from people. And that leads us to data collection. So we all need to have some type of analytics on our site. And you probably all, in your own work, have some type of metrics that you're tracking. But if not, we want to make sure that we set those up. So we have our main funnel metrics. And what we describe as a funnel is basically, it depends on what the site is and what you're trying to do. But say for a site that sells shoes, right? The funnel is from the home page until they click buy and complete their purchase. So we want to know how people are going through that entire funnel, from the minute they enter until the time that they leave. We also want to know about scroll depth, things like heat maps, because what that tells us is how people are interacting on the page. We don't know why they're doing it, that's what the research is for, but we know that they're doing it. We know where they're going on the page. And then we also want to know about time on page. So you're able to track how long people are there as well as bounce rate, right? So it lets us know, where do people think that they're not able to get the information they leave and leave the site. So to get that toolbox ready, there are a few things you can use. Google Analytics, which maybe you're all familiar with. Open Web Analytics, which is an open source tool that's very close to Google Analytics. And then Chartbeat and Adobe Target are all a few things that you can use. And what you want to do, basically, is just be able to have this information so that you're able to use it later. Why are you doing this, right? It feels like a lot. And the reason is that you want to be able to set yourself up for success later. You don't want to have to do this all over every single time. You don't want to have to start with a paper prototype every single time. You want to be able to iterate at different stages of your design and development process, and even after you've got that product shipped out. So, go on and ship it. You're ready to go. You've got that stuff set up. You can ship it. Once you've got everything set up, you've got your passive research and your passive data, then you can look at that data every couple of weeks. If you've got a lot of traffic, you might want to look at it every couple of days. And then you can compile those changes as you go along so that you're ready every time somebody asks you, do we need to make these changes? You'll know whether or not it's a good idea. And you'll have an idea of what direction you should go in later. It's basically more iterative testing, but in a different way. It's more passive. And so it just gives us a better baseline for what people need so that we're able to help them as we're creating these products and as we're giving them more information. We know from them what we need to do differently. But remember, this is a framework. It's not dogma. This framework is one that we use in my own work, right? So, and we pick and take pieces as we need them. But as you're thinking about your teams, you want to be able to take something back that is going to be useful in your day-to-day and also works within your own specific situation. So what you should be aiming for is something that creates a test and learn mindset. We shouldn't be thinking that we made the thing, we dev the thing, we ship the thing. It should be this process where we're always talking and getting more information. We want to be aiming for understanding how this quick testing can make changes that people actually need. So getting out and sharing that knowledge and information, and then opening the door for continual learning. This type of iterative testing is an amazing way to bring other teams on board with you. It's a great way to bring stakeholders on board with you because they're able to see it, you're able to have a conversation about it, and they get to be bought in. So what are the limitations? It's obviously not statistically significant. I do a lot of A/B testing and optimization, so statistical significance is big for us. But you're talking to 5 to 15 people, so it's not going to be statistically significant. And it may be anecdotal, and is definitely not meant to be like the very last word on things. It's a process, so you're going to need to go and revisit it from time to time. But prototype testing helps you save money, save time, and ensure awesomeness. Because some research is always better than no research. Good is better than perfect, and we always want to keep moving and being active. Thanks so much.